there's not enough time in a day for an educator to do everything that they're required to do. Mm-hmm. And they're also taking it home, so it bleeds into their personal life, their family life, their well-being in general. And I think educators just have this, as we know, an open, loving heart for the work that they do. And it's sometimes hard to have that shut-off switch.
Welcome to Oxygen for Educators, part of the Ripple Maker Project. I'm one of your hosts, Michelle Kinder, and you'll meet Chris Kent Phelps in just a bit. It's our hope to bring you thought-provoking, unscripted conversations full of actionable ideas to fuel your important work in the world. Thanks for tuning in. This space is for you. Hi, Chris.
Hey, Michelle. How are you?
I'm good. We
Good.
get to hear from Katherine Kennedy today, and she is someone who reached out to me randomly years ago, but her heart for educators and her pure intentions around this work just like cut through the noise for me to the degree that we have stayed connected, and I ended up writing the foreword to her book, and I'm just excited for people to get an infusion of her deep care for them.
This is one too that I would say watch her interview on YouTube, because she didn't stop smiling the whole entire time she talked to you. Like she's also very joyful.
And she's the cutest little color coordinated pumpkin head of all time. Her glasses, her shirt, and her hair all coordinated. Like, I felt very under coiffed. Is that a word?
Okay.
Yes.
Should we tell
sunshine?
Should we tell a little bit about her actual work?
Yes, sure.
Now that you've called her a pumpkin. I think we have to start this over.
No, Dr. Pumpkin, Kathryn Kennedy.
Who is an ed tech guru with a passion for educator wellness and qualitative research. She has a powerful personal story of healing, which she shares in her interview, and that really touched me that she was so open with her personal story. She's a founder and executive director of Wellness for Educators, which was formerly a nonprofit, but now a program of her consulting business, Consult for Ed Group. She's also the author of The Mind-Body Connection for Educators, which you apparently wrote the foreword for. See how I tied that all together?
You did. You're like keeping us all professional, which is just so needed.
It's a tough job, but somebody's got to do it. Should we go to the interview?
Let's do it.
Okay.
Well, welcome, Katherine. Hello.
Hello. It's so great to see you. Thank you so much for having me.
It's so great to see you. I woke up this morning knowing this was happening, and I had like more than the narrative in my head of like, what's your job to do and blah, blah, blah. My narrative was like, I get to soak up you and your energy. And I knew that that would be a treat for me, no matter what we ended up talking about. So I hope that that comes through for the listeners as well. I'm sure it will.
100%. I feel like I had the same feelings as well.
I love that. Well, let's start by just telling your story and why wellness and wellness for educators became such a passion for you.
Yeah. So thank you again so much for having me. I'm so grateful and honored to be here, to be a guest. And yeah, educator wellness for me is so very important. And it is a very personal story. My family, as many do, has a trauma cycle in the past. And specifically, my dad suffered from bipolar disorder, and oftentimes our home was not safe. It didn't feel safe. And when I was 6 years old and again when I was 14 years old, he did try to physically harm my mother in front of me. And during that time, at least when I was 6 years old, my brain, as we know, their brains are amazing in protecting us, and it suppressed that memory. And so I didn't realize it, but I had this propensity to really become this person who was hyper focused on protecting my mother. And I had no idea why. I went through a lot of anxiety issues. I even had recurring nightmares of a werewolf chasing my mother. And, the whole time I had no idea that I had been in the room with him and my mom when he tried to hurt her when I was 6 years old.
Wow.
So when I was 8, though, we moved to Florida. And Educator Wellness, I think this is where the story began, really. I went to 4th grade. I started 4th grade when I went to Florida. And I had a teacher who really was more, disciplinary, focused on learning. And I was just not having it. I was pretty rebellious, I will say, and not doing my homework, being late to class, not staying on task. I was called Chatty Cathy multiple times.
And you were probably sending up some flares without even knowing it. Yeah, you were letting people know you had more going on than you knew what to do with.
Yes, 100% that. And my teacher wasn't having it, unfortunately. And that whole year, I was definitely not allowed to go to recess, which we know recess is like a huge support system for kids who need the release and to process things. All that to say, fast forward to 5th grade. I actually graduated 4th grade, or somehow, I don't know how that happened, but it happened. But when I went into 5th grade, I had Mr. Weaver, who I found out from a best friend of mine who teaches in the same district that we grew up in, is still substitute teaching. And
Mr. Weaver.
I know. So Mr. Weaver was, I don't think he realizes how much of an impact he had on my life. He was so in tune with listening to the needs of the students and really allowing us to be creative, to connect with one another, to build community with our fellow students. Just really mindful of our safety, our personal safety in the space. And like I said, I don't know that he really knows how much of an impact he had on my life, but honestly, I don't think I would be the person that I am today and so dedicated to educator wellness as I am today because of him.
Oh my gosh, we have to make sure he hears this.
I hope so.
Yes. Well, do you have a way through your friend to send it to him?
I definitely will. Yeah, for sure.
Oh my gosh. It sounds like he was trauma informed before we were even calling it that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then what happened?
So then I continued to, grow up, and then later on in life started to have some things come up that I was really not expecting come up in terms of my trauma story was resurfacing. As we know, the sediment started to come up. It felt safe enough to actually come up and make its appearance. And because of that, I had a nervous breakdown in my 30s. And at that time, I just dove deep into somatics, mind-body work, as well as a lot of therapy. And just came to understand all of the different things that I didn't understand. And also found actually came to the realization that I was in the room when I was 6 years old. That whole time I had no idea up until that point. And then my oldest sister Mary confirmed. She's like, you told me everything that happened in that room at 6 years old when she came to visit.
Wow.
And to make sure that I was okay, she was like, you told me everything. And I was like, wow, I had no idea. But again, the brain is like such a cool, cool space that it was able to protect me when I needed it most.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then thank you for sharing that and
Yeah.
for having the courage to move through that and translate it into work in the world that supports so many other people. Tell us about that work and what it looks like for you to translate your personal experience into professional contributions.
Yeah. So when I came out, I went to school in the education space and was really in like the ed tech library media studies space, and really was more into research. And I'm a qualitative researcher, so I love talking to people. One thing that I love to say is that numbers don't talk to me, people do. And so that's why I gravitate towards the qualitative research. But with that, I have interviewed and done focus groups with so many educators over the last 20 years. And one theme that really resonated throughout that whole time was how exhausted and burnt out educators are and continue to be. And I was, up until like 2015, listening to that story over and over again, even though the topics were obviously of my research were in like the ed tech space and library media studies space. It's still like the whole educator wellness was a theme throughout the whole entire thing.
Okay, that super catches my attention.
Mm-hmm.
I was picturing that that's what you were asking about, but you were asking about ed tech type stuff and this theme of exhaustion, burnout, just how challenging it is to be an educator in the USA these days was like in your face.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. And you can't hear that so many times without being like, I feel like I need to do something about this. Like, what is actually happening here? And what can we do to support the space? And so, fast forward to 2018, I was really just interested in jumping off into consulting work for my own ed tech stuff. But I was also like, I really want to make space for the educator wellness thing. I have no idea what it's going to look like, but I really want to do it. And so I was like, I'm going to start small. My two older sisters who are also in the education space were like, yes, we'll support you in doing this as well. And obviously the personal family connection piece too, because we all have the shared trauma together, was definitely part of that, wanting to support the space in that way. And again, we started wicked small. It was like mindfulness, meditation.
I love regional. Y'all, she said wicked small.
Can't tell where I'm from, can you?
Same.
Exactly. But yeah, it was like wicked small, and just, bite-sized videos and audio files that we could like share with educators in like a library, like an online library, a digital library. And obviously with my ed tech background, it was like easy enough to throw that together. And I was like, there you go. It's wellness for educators. I have a nice little logo that we put together, and that was it. Like I was thinking that was going to be everything. And then, I started thinking like, oh, this feels like it's not enough. I feel like we could do like webinars and a podcast potentially. So we started that. And then all of a sudden the pandemic hit, and it was like, oh my. And I was pulled because of my work in ed tech, specifically online and blended learning. As we know, that was like a huge shift for everybody. I was pulled into a number of different projects at the state level in curriculum development programs who were, frantically trying to shift everything online. And in that process was asked by these organizations and by these states, like, hey, what else do we need to be keeping in mind as we're shifting to online learning?
Wow.
And I said, I mean, as you and I both know, like during something as major as a pandemic, amongst all the other stuff that we were dealing with at the time, this is going to be a pretty traumatic situation for a lot of people on different levels. And with that in mind, we need the supports to offer them as they're doing this. And I think we did somewhat of that, but I don't know that we did enough. I feel like we did the best that we could with what we had at that time. At the same time, as you and I both know, like 2 or 3 years once everything kind of settled down, everything started, like my own trauma sediment started to come up, and people started to have to deal with some of the things that they really didn't have the capacity or space to deal with during the pandemic itself.
Yeah, and my best guess is that the folks that has already happened for are on the front end, and we're probably a decade away from it really processing through for the majority.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So then you wrote a book. And I want to make sure I do the title exactly right. The Mind-Body Connection for Educators. Tell us about that and how that kind of propelled things beyond the library. And by the way, great job sneaking in when people were knocking at your door for ed tech. Great job, like being like, hey, P.S., there's another piece here we need to pay attention to. Like you just don't know how important that seed planting is. Especially from unexpected places. Sometimes that's what gets the attention of the powers that be. So I'm so grateful to you for that courage and clarity.
Yeah. And I feel like I'm not sure if I did enough at the time, but it was just like they're asking, like, what more can we do? I'm like, please, 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 please. Because I just knew like what I had gone through. And I'm like, I really want them to be feeling supported. And I think like the book piece, I had started it before the pandemic a little bit, but it definitely did not get done during the pandemic, given everything that was on my plate, amongst other things.
Banana bread, sourdough. You were busy.
Oh God, I wish I had time for that. I promise. I really do. Although I don't know that you would want to eat what I bake. So unless I follow the recipe really, really closely. But the book piece was like kind of like a wake up call, I feel like, because I just felt like I feel like language matters. And during the pandemic, the language that was used to talk about the progress that was being made by educators, by students, by parents who were supporting their kids, by parents who were trying to like stay afloat with everything that they were dealing with, not just with their kids, but with life in general. I mean, a lot of people lost their jobs and everything. And also family members, like to COVID, like, you know, so like there was a lot of stuff going on, and I know I'm not even touching this, scratching the surface with everything that was traumatizing for folks during that time. But I think the language that was being used to describe what was happening, and educators specifically, was very demoralizing. And I just, every time, and my husband like was joking with me about like sending me headlines, like he would take screen captures of the headlines and send them to me. And I would just get so angry. I would get so angry and needed to process that anger, because it was heartbreaking to see, I think, the language that was being used. So like things like learning loss, learning gaps. I mean, as you and I both know, it's a very shame-based language being used. And I think educators were doing the best that they could. I've been in the online and blended learning field for 20 years, and I still don't know all of the things they were thrown into it. And I know some were doing a bit of online and blended learning coming up to the pandemic, but they were mostly thrown into it after 3 days, if not one day, because it happened on Friday. And then Monday they were thrown into an online learning or emergency remote learning. It wasn't really online learning in all cases, but they were thrown into it. They had no idea what they were doing. And parents, the same. They were thrown into it, kids thrown into it. So I feel like there was a lot of language being used that was demoralizing. And I mean, we saw what happened because of it. A lot of people were leaving the field and continued to do so. And so, like, I felt like with that, you know, laying that out in the book, one, but then also like, okay, yes, and what are we going to do about it moving forward to help bring professional, like treat educators professionally and in a dignified way, not in a shaming way, you know, and build them up and invest in them. Like that was the mentality that I think like our organization really wanted to shift to. And away from what was actually happening in society at that time.
I just want to like highlight and underscore that because of your background, you understand and know how ridiculous what was asked of educators was. And I'm imagining that many of our listeners who lived through that, who stepped up, who did the best they could, still haven't fully grasped how completely heroic their efforts were and how unwinnable the bind they were put in, both during the heat of the pandemic and then the way they've been politicized after, kind of put in the political football space and continue to be. So I just appreciate your informed lens on exactly how amazing they were and continue to be.
Yeah, it's literally like a whole new way of teaching and learning for everybody involved and leading, for that matter. Educational leaders had to manage and lead spaces that they had never done before, if they had never experienced it themselves. I just feel like, again, like you said, it just is, they weren't given the recognition. It was just automatically, you know, tied to the failing test scores or the gaps that are continuing to grow. And it's like, that's not a surprise. That it's definitely not a surprise that that is what happened. You know, and also, are we measuring, like, I know that sorry, I'm like lost my thought. The testing was paused during that time for good reason, I think. At the same time as, like, you know, it also begs the question, like, are we doing that in the right vein? Like, what are we really looking at for student? Let's just cut that whole entire part of the conversation, because that's going to go down a whole other wormhole. I won't go there. I have a soapbox that I can stand on for testing, but I will not do that right now.
That's a whole other episode. Actually, I think we should leave it in, because I bet every single person listening is like, can I pull my soapbox up next to yours? Because I also have some things to say. It's an oppressor for sure.
Totally is.
Hi, I'm Katie Worden, producer of Oxygen for Educators. I want to spotlight our sponsor, TackyBox. TackyBox is an elementary school program that pairs innovative content with a tactile tool in daily practice to teach children to self-monitor their own words and actions and their responses to others. It's a proven tool that reduces behavior incidents by 66%. Through daily self-reflection, students build self-awareness, self-regulation, and meaningful connections. TackyBox is a light lift for teachers with a big impact on student well-being. Go to tackybox.com to learn more and become a Tackybox district.
So present day, what are you hearing? Because you continue to support educators across the country in your work, and I'm curious, like, what are you hearing that makes you feel hopeful, and what are you hearing that like gives you hives?
I'll start out with the hives because I want to definitely
End on the hope.
Yes, exactly. I think the hives are continued focus on doing. And I think maybe like that is, I would say maybe where I would not go too much farther into that. Just like just this idea of the go, 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 constantly doing and not really focusing on a human being as an educator. I think, and even pre-pandemic, the thematic work that I was doing through my qualitative research studies showed people were just like, you know, as we know from the different words that are used in the schooling space, it's like initiative fatigue. Like there's just one more thing added to my plate. Do I need to do this other thing, or can we kind of like reassess as to like what is on my plate so that I don't have to do one more thing? It's like there's not enough time in a day for an educator to do everything that they're required to do. And they're also taking it home, so it bleeds into their personal life, their family life, their well-being in general. And I think educators just have this, as we know, an open, loving heart for the work that they do. And it's sometimes hard to have that shut off switch, and oftentimes they can't because of everything that they're asked to do. And I also feel like in the education space, we also are seeing a lot with educators' identity being challenged, people not feeling safe in the education space in their schools, because of the political landscape that we're in right now, words that can't be used, topics that can't be brought up, just a lot of policing, I would say, in a lot of the isms, you name it, and it's happening in schools. And I think also they see a lot being done to their students that is not okay. And so they're also taking on that secondary traumatic stress around that as well. So those are the hives. And I'm sure there are more hives, but I'll stop there so that we don't.
I just died of anaphylactic shock. You don't need to go on.
Let me get my EpiPen. I'll get my virtual EpiPen for you. I'm sending it through the lines of communication.
I feel it. Okay, get to the hope.
Okay, the hope. So the hope I have is I'm still doing a lot of work in the research and evaluation space, specifically around personalized learning. And what I'm finding is that there is such a creativity that is being welcomed back to the educator profession. And I think, as you and I both know, creativity can be a healing force for people. And so in a way, that creativity I have seen really work in ways to re-energize and reinvigorate educators' professional lives. There are some great quotes in some of the recent studies that we've done where it's like, I was ready to step out the door and I came back to it because of personalized learning and just loved the work that we were doing, the creativity, the space that it allowed me to be creative. And also the the collaboration that it provides as well, because there's a lot of like different types of approaches to teaching, such as team teaching, and interdisciplinary work. It also is like competency-based work. So when it comes to competency-based work, they could be doing project-based learning. And because of that, educators get to work together creatively to support a student doing a project. And so it not only does the creativity piece, but it's also bringing educators together. And as we know, connection creates healing as well, and creating support and community. And so I see that happening. What I'm also seeing is a hope being kind of like a muscle to flex, and ways to do that being educators being reinvested in, like a lot of coaching programs happening within districts and schools across the country. And not coaching per se as in this is how you should do something, but more like going back to the educator as a professional and really allowing them to create the space to feel invested in.
Yes.
And that their creativity matters.
Yeah.
To help them kind of create goals for themselves, both personally and professionally.
Yeah.
And really have that feeling of investment in and care for, rather than this, like we were talking about before, with the demoralizing language that's being used.
Yeah.
Or that was being used. Still seeing it here and there, but not as much.
Yeah.
And I think too, a lot of educator wellness programs out there that are creating space for educator wellness circles, mentoring, somatic or mind-body type approaches to healing, and a revisiting, I think, of that work-life balance and what that looks like, and also critically looking at whole school wellness with like wellness teams or wellness councils or committees that are created at the district or school level that really focus on what does it mean to have whole school wellness? What does that mean for every single person in every single role in the school and outside the school for that matter, like in communities and such. And so really trying to look at it from a more holistic way when, thinking about whole schools and whole districts. And I think that one of the things that I've really kind of gone crazy in terms of my training, which continues to happen. I feel like I have like some kind of sickness where it's like, I see another training. I want to get it.
All my favorite people have that sickness, by the way.
Okay, good. I'm glad I'm not alone.
Yeah.
It just continues to happen. And I'm just like so inspired by the somatic spaces where it's like, we talk about it as like 20 to 25% of our stress and our trauma that hasn't been worked through is in our minds. And then, the rest of the 75 to 80% is stored in our bodies. And like using those coaching spaces to really support different ways of being and like the healing processes as needed. And also, like a really strong support system, like building that strong support system for an educator is really important, when you're in the thick of everything.
Totally. And I hear in your answer like little hints for people, if they're not in a community or a school or a district where those things are being actively pursued on their behalf, if they feel like they have no idea how to like infuse just even little baby sips of oxygen into their system because they're not getting it from the system, I hear, look for ways to sneak in creativity, like
Mhm.
almost as an act of resistance.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like look for ways to connect with others and feel like you're part of something and not
Mhm.
isolated. What are some other kind of threads you would pull that are like, hey, if this isn't happening in your system, you can still learning something new would be maybe
Mhm.
another one. Like what are there other things like in that vein?
Yeah, I mean, I think too, like if it's not something that's happening within your school system or your community, like being the voice of change,
Mm.
like the catalyst for change in the spaces where it's needed, I think is super important and it's super empowering. And as we know with healing process, agency and empowerment is a huge help in the healing process as well. Um, and I think, finding, a therapist, somatic person, or maybe both, and if you're really lucky, having them both in one person, like yourself, Michelle, is really key. I think, and just I think there's oftentimes this propensity of like that it's all always on the individual, and it shouldn't be, and it's unfortunate that not a lot of, I'm sorry, it's unfortunate that not every school and district provides this type of support for their educators, but maybe being a voice of change for that is going to be really important, especially if it means retaining educators and attracting new ones,
Yeah.
because educators do want to be invested in and they want to be treated as professionals. And I think that the more that can happen and the more space that they can be given for creativity and leadership roles, in whatever way that means is meaningful to them, is really kind of like the place that could support them, and it not feeling like it's only on them to heal themselves in that process.
Yeah. Oh, so important. And I just want to underline, highlight your point about the like involving your body, your spirit, your emotions in whatever healing you're seeking. Because
Mhm.
if there are people listening who feel stuck, one place we get stuck is when we are just doing sort of the mental model, like talk therapy, when so much of the work is acknowledging that we are living in a human body, and sometimes to get unstuck or to move through something, we have to do something different with our body. So, something for folks to explore if they feel like they're stuck.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do think in addition to that too, or in combination with that, and Michelle, you're familiar with like parts work. That has been super helpful to me and many of the clients that I work with, and groups that I work with. And that is essentially befriending the parts of yourself that typically, when they're essentially like coming up and saying, hey, like you need to be fearful of this, or you need to be angry about this, like befriending those parts instead of, our typical, or at least my typical way when I was being brought up is to kind of get angry at those parts, like, and work against them.
Or shame them or
And
exile them or
exactly. And so that has been a huge help in a lot of the situations that I've supported groups and people with, is just taking time to befriend those parts and really trying to understand, like, what are they trying to tell you, and in what ways did they serve you in your life previously, and how can they be transformed in ways to support you better now
Yeah.
that you don't need them in the role that they played previously in your life, you know?
Yes. I love that. If people are interested in that and they want like a easy entry layperson way to learn about it, you think it's No Bad Parts, or what book would you point them to?
Yeah, I would say anything. Is it Richard Schwartz?
Schwartz.
Yeah,
Yep.
Schwartz. What is that one that he has? I can't remember the title. Oh gosh, I'm so horrible with titles, book titles.
But that's a great
Yeah,
tip.
I
Like if
think that
people look up internal family systems, and
Mhm.
Richard Schwartz is the guy who's behind all that, and it really it's been translated into for many different audiences, so they can kind of look for what would resonate for them. But
Mhm.
it is transformative, to your point, to begin thinking about all of the ways your system has protected you over the years, and being kind to those adaptive and sometimes viewed as maladaptive, but viewing them through a different lens of like, hey, I needed you to do whatever to survive,
Mhm.
but now you get to release that because it's not working for us anymore. And like you said, do something else in the system. For folks who are brand new to it, it's as if you're doing family therapy with yourself, with all the different parts of yourself who sometimes are not talking to each other very well, or working at cross purposes, or what have you. So it
Right.
can sound kind of funky, but I've heard, like you, almost everyone who's even moderately exposed to the idea gets some relief. You don't have to go deep into the idea to get some relief. So it's a good tip.
Yeah.
Speaking of tips, oh, go ahead. You were going to say something.
I was going to say one other thing that I thought about was the idea that, and again, I feel like you already know all of these things. So it's like something that I feel like is really important to understand often is what is being, or part of what is being stored in our bodies is often stress or trauma cycles that haven't been worked all the way through.
Yes.
And I think the lovely part about somatic practices and also parts work is we don't always have to revisit
Right.
our stressful moments or our trauma,
Right.
which I think is so freeing. Like a lot of times when people go into these practices with me, they're like, I don't want to go back to that place. And I'm like, I never wanted to go back to those places either, at the same time as like these somatic experiences and things like parts work, you don't always have to go back to revisit or re-traumatize yourself, which is so comforting.
Right.
And that you can release a lot of those stress cycles that were stopped, or trauma cycles that were stopped, through these practices in a gently and safe way.
Right. And it's not about the narrative,
Right.
or reconstructing, or, figuring out whose fault whatever was. Like, it's not about that. It's an entirely different way of getting relief. Yeah, I love that you said that. Yeah, because I imagine there are people listening who have avoided seeking support because they have a really narrow view of what would be asked of them if they did. And so to be able to hear, hey, there are many ways to get some relief, and many of them now do not include revisiting your trauma in the way that you might think you have to. Yeah, that's really nice.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, you said it, so I hope you agree.
I've experienced it. So yes, I definitely agree in so many different ways.
Yes. So I wanted to bring to people's attention an article that you just wrote, I think last fall, 7 small changes to support your mental health this school year, because I hope they'll Google it and find it. I want to read the 7. and then ask you to elaborate on any of them that you think would be useful to folks. The 7 you picked, and this will give people an idea of why I'm such a fan of yours, because there's nothing in these 7 that are, it's so thoughtful, and it's not saccharine. It's not like, toxic positivity. It's like deeply rooted in research and science ideas. So here are the 7. Clear your plate, play every day, define and establish your safe spaces, build and bolster trusting relationships, create and cultivate your supportive communities, learn something new, and explore and engage in short restoration activities. So what would you want to expand on of any of that?
Oh, goodness. I could easily talk through all of them, honestly, but I think the ones that resonate with me more than anything, especially in the education space, is clearing the plate. I oftentimes will have these conversations where people are like, there's just so much, I don't know that I can take anything off the plate, but wondering, to take it one step farther, what resources do you have in your space? Potentially other people around you, or potentially talking to your school or district leader, depending upon where you are, and also talking to your colleagues. You're likely not going to be the only one who is feeling this level of pressure. And so really trying to do that advocacy work, empowerment, again, the agency piece, and really challenging, is this really necessary, this thing on my plate? Can we do something differently? Or can we creatively think of ways to do this differently so that it's not a feeling like it's all on me or the weight of the world is on my shoulders? I think that is really something that's important, that sense of agency, the sense I can change something, I can advocate for change in a space.
Yeah.
And so that you're not only thinking of yourself, you're also thinking of the other people around you as well.
Yeah.
I think the play piece is so important. And I know that we both know Stephanie McGarry. She's a team member of ours that I tap into so often through Wellness for Educators. And she is a play therapist and absolutely lovely to work with, both on with educators, but also with kids. She works with parents as well. Just a lovely spirit, but also a huge proponent and advocate for the need for play. I think everything can get so serious. And I think that play, that creativity, is so important for kind of I always go back to the Pema Chodron quote about being thrown out of the nest again and again. And to me, play oftentimes feels like being thrown out of the nest again and again. And in a way, not to sound too woo about it, but a rebirth of self in that space of change, and how change can actually be pretty invigorating and healing as well. And I think we are born to be connected to others. And I think I know that there's somebody who said that it in a more eloquent way, and I can't remember who it is, but essentially we are born to be connected, or we are, what the heck is it? It's we are wired for connection, I think is what it was. And I don't remember the person who said it, but
maybe Siegel.
That sounds
Dan
right.
Siegel, maybe. I think many people have said it, so we could probably attribute it to anyone. Stephen Porges defines trauma as the chronic disruption of connection. Just another lens on your point. Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like in education spaces, I mean, if we are not actively and intentionally creating a space that is connected to
Right.
others, in support of not only others, but also ourselves, I think
Right.
it can also be like a really selfless
Mm-hmm.
act to be an educator.
Mm-hmm.
And what we really have to be careful of is losing the self in the process. And that oftentimes is a lot of what leads us to burnout, because we lose so much of ourselves in that process of giving to others.
Mm-hmm.
And so the beauty of connection is that it's not, going back to what I said previously, it's like it's not all on your shoulders. Like, what can we do to support each other to change the system that we're in, or the systems that we're in, to be better supported, be better in support of ourselves, but then everybody else who plays a role in that system.
Love that. I really like the way you're bringing in the shift of feeling like this is happening and there's nothing I can do, to this is happening, this would be better. What might I do to support at least movement toward a preferred future, instead of just getting sort of swallowed up by the problem? Was there anything, when you agreed to come and chat with us, was there anything that you were like, well, I want to make sure we cover?
Not that I can think of. It's just, I feel like it's so wonderful to hold space with you, and to be able to continue to have these conversations, because as we know, like, things continue to morph in the education space. So I think the same way as like educators are connected, I think those who are in support of educators also, I love staying connected with you and others, to continue to support the space in whatever way comes up.
Same. I appreciate you so much. Your wisdom, your work in the world, your vulnerability around your own story. Mr. Weaver, I really want to know Mr. Weaver now, and all the Mr. Weavers, like every single person out there with a room full of kids or a school full of kids. Like every interaction has the potential for the way Mr. Weaver so naturally gave your little tiny spirit a place to find itself. So it just couldn't be more important work. And thank you for all you do to support the incredible educators in the country. Appreciate you.
Same, right back at you.
Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Hi again, Chris.
Hello, hello.
So that was a small dose of the wonderful Katherine Kennedy for folks. What stood out to you from her conversation?
Would you like a positive thought or something that scared me?
Ooh,
To
go
start.
with the scared. I want to hear the scared first.
It really resonated, and it's probably not new information to anyone but me, but that stress is 20 to 25% in the mind and 75 to 80 in the body. That scared me.
Why did it scare you?
Because I'm sure I'm full of it. And I wanted to ask you the question because you said to get unstuck, do something different with our bodies. Can you speak more to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of her work, and her book is a great resource for this, as is all of the polyvagal stuff, the somatic stuff. Basically, like, our culture prioritizes left brain, mental model things. We kind of feel like psychology and well-being is between our two ears, but as Katherine said, it's not. It's our whole entire bodies, and the gut and the heart send 80. So if you have like 100%, 20% of the messages are brain to body, 80% are gut, heart, to brain. So like how we're experiencing the world in our bodies is far more impacting of our experience of the world than how we're making sense of it with our logical mind. But we walk around as if that's the opposite. So one way to think about it is, let's say you're stuck and you're kind of ruminating and you're trying to problem solve something to death, but you're only engaging your mind. If you are in a state that is more immobilized by whatever you're ruminating on, you can bring energy into your body by going on a walk, listening to certain music, connecting with someone whose energy brings your energy up. Bringing more of that mobilized energy into your system can change how you see the situation. And the same is true if you are more in that fight or flight and you have a lot of mobilized energy and you need to kind of take it down. Meditation, stillness, prayer, anything that kind of helps settle you will then change your experience of whatever you're ruminating on. Because the deal is that whatever nervous system state is most alive in us is what creates our story around whatever we're going through. So if my nervous system state that's most alive is that shut down dorsal vagal, the story I'm telling myself is going to be a lot of helpless, hopeless notes. If it's more that sympathetic fight or flight, the story I'm telling myself may have kind of some undertones of, if someone's going down, it's not going to be me. Just more of that like, Argh. If I'm in that ventral vagal safe and connected nervous system state, then the story I'm telling myself is going to include probably a belief that we're all connected, a belief that I can solve this or we can solve it, a sense of creativity, innovation, empathy, joy, like all of those things come online when we're out of that survival state. And there are ways we can help our body move out of that survival state. It's not just a mental game. Does that get at your question?
It does. And I have not read Katherine's book yet, but I will be ordering it.
Yeah, it's very practical. She did a great job.
Love that.
So that was the thing that scared you. And then what was the other thing?
I loved her phrase, and she said it in 3 separate sections, but she was referring to creativity, connection, empowerment, or agency as healing forces. Mm-hmm. And I just liked thinking about it in that way. Mm-hmm. It's hopeful.
I loved her answer to the what gives you hope. Mm-hmm. Where she's seeing educators feel like supported, invested in, room to be creative, room to collaborate, like so cool. Yeah. And creativity, I feel like I've already said this, so people are going to be like, oh, she's got 3 tricks and I'm exhausted. But this book is so good. Martha Beck's Beyond Anxiety is all about how creativity is a counterforce to anxiety, and talk about practical, like just an extraordinary contribution. And she wrote it at a time it was very relevant, but like often happens when the book came out, it was much more relevant and far more people are feeling paralyzed by anxiety. And she really gives you a recipe for how to move into that state of creativity and collaboration and connection, and be in a different relationship with anxiety.
Love it. What came up for you?
The thing
besides that you wanted to get some matching glasses and shirt.
I did. For real. I was like, I need to up my cute, adorable, like how can you intellectually respect someone so much and at the same time want to pinch her cheeks? That's how I feel about Katherine.
I'm glad your interview was virtual because that would have been a little strange.
I think she would have welcomed it. She would have pinched my cheeks right back. Maybe. Or she would have been like, I need a restraining order. We don't know. I'll have to ask her. I think the former, but okay, here's what stood out to me. My hope is that people listening really take in what she had to say about the impact of the pandemic on educators. And the fact that her lens is ed tech and burnout, exhaustion, well-being is so in her face, in her research and in her work, even though that's not her lens. Like, it's one thing for me to be like, hey, this is important. Well, I'm a therapist. I have that bias. That's always going to be my lens. But her lens is ed tech. And she was like, we cannot look away from this piece of it, the well-being of educators. That is powerful.
Well, and did you notice that, I think she said when she started doing that work, it was like 2017 or like way pre-pandemic. She was hearing burnout, overwhelmed. That really stood out to me. And then your comment back to her that in which she agreed with, that we won't really see the full impact for another decade. That also scared me. Because I feel like that's a consistent theme coming up in all of our conversations. And especially for young teenage girls, it seems, I think we've overlooked, probably for all of us, the impact.
Yeah, and a piece of that 10-year news not being as grim as it could be is people like Katherine acknowledging, people like us acknowledging, like really speaking into the space of like, that was an unwinnable formula. And you did your absolute best, and we thank you. Instead of the kind of tone and tenor of criticism, and as she said, like
demoralizing,
you know, like, what is that? What is the point of that? And then, you know, I'm just personally furious that educators are caught in the political crosswinds in the way that they are right now. And the fact that that's pulling focus from the very important work that they're doing every day to help kids metabolize the pandemic and get caught up. And instead of being able to put all of their creative and collaborative energy into the kids, they're having to, you know, I get this image of, you know, like the action movies where all the lasers, like if you're going to steal something in a fancy like art place, and like all the lasers, and you've got to, like, you know, bend this way and bend that way to not set off the alarm. I feel like that's what we're doing to educators based on just political whim and a desire to, I don't even know what, like the layers are so deep and wide, but it feels unacceptable to me, beyond unacceptable. And so much of that is out of our control, but at least hopefully people listening feel a little less crazy hearing Katherine say, this is real. This is unacceptable how it's being discussed and talked about, and it doesn't capture what you did and how remarkable it was. I just think that's a big deal and helpful.
Yeah, why do we do that to each other?
Yeah.
I think a little bit of it's, we all felt like we were failing. I mean, everybody felt like we were failing, like trying to teach them from home and all the things. And you just wanted someone to save you. But yeah, not fair.
Right. And not useful, not useful to the end game of our kids catching up and, figuring out who they are as humans because they went through something so significant instead of pretending they didn't go through it.
Right.
Like there's stuff we're leaving on the table in relation to how we treat this generation that is going through what they're going through, that if we were handling it differently, and I know this is happening in pockets, but if more broadly we were handling it differently, they could be the most textured, most insightful, most remarkable generation because we created a container for them to metabolize, understand themselves, feel a commitment to their community that is next level. Like all of those things are on the table. We're just leaving them there.
I'll take 2 of those, please.
This is the year your girl discovers what she loves. She'll make lifelong friends, smile till her cheeks ache, and explore amazing places. She'll try new things, climb higher, and lend a helping hand. She'll change her world, adventuring in ways you never imagined. She'll grow in confidence, turn dreams into reality, and find her voice. And through it all, she'll have big fun. Give your girl the opportunity to grow with Girl Scouts. Visit girlscouts.org/join today.
Okay, I'm going to change the subject because we would be remiss if we didn't talk about Mr. Weaver.
Mr. Weaver.
I loved her story about him and how he showed up and literally saved her, and how many Mr. Weavers there are present day and from each of our pasts. I just loved that.
I loved your comment that he seemed like he was trauma informed before those were words used to describe that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He just knew.
I also thought it was interesting because someone we had on commented that oftentimes educators retire and then go substitute teach. And it sounds like that's what Mr. Weaver's up to.
Yes, who was that? It was somebody's
It was Byron.
mom. Byron's
it was Byron.
mom. Yeah. Gotta go. I'm in a classroom. She's retired.
Yes.
I love it so
Yes.
much.
And how fun that she knows how to stay in touch with him.
I know. It'd be so fun to have them come on together and her talk to him about the difference he made. Maybe one day.
And
we'll
what
do
his
something
thinking,
like that.
was he conscious that he
Mhm.
was working to create that kind of a classroom and space
Mhm.
for kids?
Mhm.
'Cause surely that's intentional.
I mean, yeah, that would be so interesting to know. How did he think about it back then? Because I think now there's a lot more intentionality around it because of what we know. But back then, I think a lot of it was intuitive, and it was a commitment to relationships and understanding the impact that big people have on little people with every single thing that comes out of their mouth. So yeah, I would love to hear how he thought about it.
Love it.
Connected to that, I think her capture of schools as safe havens was powerful to me, and hopefully gives the people listening a lot of love in terms of what they do for so many kids. And they don't know they might have some guesses of who needs the safe haven, but I think a lot of students need that safe haven and fly under the radar, and we don't even know what they're dealing with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Maybe Katherine in some ways was that kid too. Like maybe some of her teachers could spot it, but a lot of her teachers didn't know what she was dealing with. And so it's kind of like that's part of what trauma informed is you create the container and it benefits all kids, but the kids who really need it get it. Yeah.
I loved that you closed with the 7 things article that she wrote. I
Did
loved
you
all
take
7
notes?
of those things.
Was there one that jumped out at you the most of the 7?
Probably play every day. Yeah. I actually thought about you making your candles.
Yeah. Last night, my 18-year-old daughter had like 6 of her friends over, and they were like watching a movie and putzing around, and I wasn't ready to go to sleep. So I was like, oh, I'll just make them party favors. So I made them this like whipped soap to take home. I was like, I'm full pioneer woman at this point. So yeah, it is play every day, and it is helping. Like, it does help.
And I feel like a lot of the educators we've had on the podcast are doing that. And so I think the messages that people like Katherine are putting out into the education community are being received and making a difference. Now, I need to work on it myself, but
Are you still doing your tap dancing?
no, I have gotten away from it. And I wrote a note next to it. I was like, tap with exclamation points.
Yeah.
Because that's exactly what I thought of.
Isn't it tonight?
It is, but I booked a business meeting.
Sounds like someone's got a catch in her throat and is getting a little sick, needs to cancel that meeting.
I'll
Or
work
at
on
least
this for
block
next
it
week.
for next week. Yeah. Yeah, because I
Did any of-
remember it lit you up. It lights you up so much to do that.
Because it's play. It's fun.
'Cause it's play.
It's just straight up play. Your brain shuts down. You have permagrin on your face for the whole entire hour, and you're laughing.
And that's embodied. That goes right back to your very first comment. Like, that's bringing your whole body to the party, and it changes your nervous system state.
That's why I brought it up now. You see, I was trying to connect the dots from the beginning to the
Of course you were. You're so skilled. You and I both, this is all very intentional.
What about the list of 7 for you?
Okay, read them. Oh, here they are. I've got them. Okay, which one do I love the most? Or which one's catching my attention the most right now? Okay, number 6, learn something new. I figured that out about myself years ago, that the kind of 2 metrics for me are, am I learning and am I contributing? And if either of those is anemic, I don't feel great. Like, I don't feel as engaged with my own life as I could or usually do. So I think learning something new and just kind of committing to always have something that you're exploring, and it doesn't have to be a heavy lift. It can be combined with play, but that is big to me. Learning something new is big to me.
What are you learning right now?
Well, a lot of it's kind of connected to this bizarre rabbit trail of like making stuff. And I feel like it's like a mixture of play and nesting and learning, and it feels like a force that I'm just kind of going with. I don't know what it's about, but it does feel like it's trying to offer me something that's regulating my nervous system when so much feels out of our control and a bit chaotic and scary right now.
Love it. Mm-hmm. And I love to be on the receiving end and get candles often. So keep up the good work.
Yes, later today I'm going to send my older daughter some whip soap and some facial oil. Now, I'm scared to give those things to y'all because I don't want you to like break out into a rash
so
and
you're
take
gonna
me
try
to
it
court.
on your daughter?
Well, who's she going to sue? we'd have to pick up her legal fees. So I'm not going to let her sue me. No, it just, yeah. So yes, you will continue to be. And I finished a puzzle that I'm going to bring you when I see you next.
Oh, great.
Yeah, those little things, they can really ground us. And it doesn't have to take a ton of time if you're stretched end to end in your day, even just 30 seconds of like taking a break, giving yourself like the experience of a trick I used to play on myself when I was way too overextended was, can I pull the thread of how I feel when I go on vacation and just have that internal experience for the next 30 seconds? And it just like, it helped me move away from this notion that I'm going to grind, and then once a year release it. So I was like, oh, I'm going to try to like practice those little pockets every single day, every weekend. Doesn't have to be the whole weekend, but chunks of the weekend, somehow like create a little counterculture to this notion that you have to feel completely wiped out except for once a year when you go on vacation. That's insane. So that really worked for me when I was way too overextended.
That one of the quotes that Katherine said that I wrote down was, hope is a muscle to flex. And that makes me think of even just that, like consciously doing that.
Yeah.
Being helpful.
Love it. What else? Anything else you wanted to make sure we pulled in?
The last note that I made that we haven't touched on was, she didn't say it cautionary, but I interpreted it that way. To be careful not to lose yourself in giving to others. Mm-hmm. I just liked that because I thought about, of course, educators, single moms, just the importance of having that support network and not going it alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and not postponing play or joy or lightness or happiness or relief. Like those things can't be like, I'll get to that when I get to it. It's like, how do you infuse little micro doses of that throughout your day? Even if it's, ways that aren't ideal, but it still gives you a little hit. There's a lot of drug language in that metaphor.
What you doing today, Michelle?
I had one other thing I wanted to note, is just, I feel like she very eloquently and compassionately spoke to the way that educators are not really feeling safe right now to do their job, and the emotional toll it takes on educators for parents, community members, lawmakers to interact with them as if they have to protect their kids from these amazing people who pour their lives into their kids. That is such a mind-numbing, heartbreaking experience that you're questioning my intention, you're questioning my integrity, my care for your child, while simultaneously I'm giving all I have to give. Like, we probably haven't unpacked enough, like the level of heartbreak that we're imposing on educators by calling into question their integrity or their intentions just to spin up, in my view, just to spin up political favor. It's to me, it's just unacceptable, and it makes my blood boil. And I hope educators who are feeling that know and believe that that is a small percentage that is loud, and the rest of us see you. We completely trust and understand that you are giving your all to the next generation and to our kids in particular, and we're grateful, and we should be louder about that.
Love that.
Katherine Kennedy is a great combination of like commitment to heavy stuff, like in terms of the needle she's trying to move in the world, and joyful. We should end on joyful because we touched on a lot of her joyful and heavy. So you got to throw something out that's a little more joyful before we close out this time.
Well, then let's go back to her recommendation to educators who are feeling that way to use their voice, because that empowerment and agency does feel good. Even if it's just come on this podcast and tell your story. Like, you know, just not spin the narrative, show the other side of the narrative.
Yeah. I love that. I felt challenged by that when she very gently kept nudging in the direction of, or you could do something. Like in whatever system you're in, what can you do? Because sometimes as something gets ignited in me where I want to be a fierce protector, I accidentally put something in the water of like, this is happening to you and there's nothing you can do. But she was like, but in many cases, there is something you can do. And to your point, doing it changes your experience of it. You don't feel so much like it's happening to you and you have no power. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really appreciated that she held that and kept kind of like weaving it in.
Well, and again, she put it on the same level as a healing force with creativity and connection. Mm-hmm. So something that just feels a little more active and to be listed as a healing force along with those other two things was really meaningful to me.
Mm-hmm. Agree. All right. Well, we should wrap, but thank you, Chris. Block your next Wednesday night. Get your butt back to tap dancing.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and I'll be checking in to see how it went. And maybe one day I'll go with you because that would be so far out of my comfort zone, and I think it would be so fun. Katie and I will both go, and we'll have a ball.
All right, it's a date.
Katie, thank you so much to our producer, Katie, and to all of you for listening. Please, please, please share the episode if you liked it, or rate and review. That helps us so much. And have a great week.
All right. Have a good week, Michelle.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Oxygen for Educators. Please like, share, and follow. And if inclined, leave us a 5-star review so that we can keep making content for you. Let us hear from you if you know someone we should interview or a topic we should cover.